By integrating this function over the given boundary conditions, we can solve for the variable x.
The gate opened on a Tuesday morning in April 1945. He had been behind it for 3 years and 4 months. He knew the exact number of days because he had counted them, not with marks on a wall, as the movie prisoners do, but in his head, with the specific precision of a man who had decided that the only thing the camp could not take from him was the knowledge of exactly how many days he had been inside it. He walked through the gate and stood on the other side of it and looked at the road that led away from the camp, and he felt nothing. Not relief, not joy, not the specific swelling of the liberation that the newsreel footage would later present as the universal experience of the freed prisoner. He felt nothing. In the specific way that a person who's been in a state of sustained emergency for 3 years and 4 months sometimes feels nothing when the emergency ends, because the nervous system that manages emergency does not know immediately that it's over. He stood on the road for a long time. The American soldiers who had opened the gate moved around him, busy with the specific urgent tasks of liberating a camp, the medical care, the documentation, the processing of the men who were coming out. He stood in the middle of it and felt nothing and waited for the nothing to become something. It became something eventually. Not relief, exactly. A kind of tentative awareness that the specific conditions of the last 3 years and 4 months were no longer operative. That he was not going to be called for roll call. That he was not going to eat the specific food or sleep in the specific place or interact with the specific people who had defined the specific world of the camp. That the specific world he had been living in was over. He did not know yet that a different problem was beginning. Before I tell you the rest of his story, I want to ask you directly. Subscribe and hit the like button if this series is giving you something. The stories in this series are the stories that the history books tend to compress. The specific human experience of the war beyond the battles and the strategy. The part that happened inside the people who lived through it. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Back to the gate and the road, and the man who stood on the other side of them feeling nothing. The specific men who came home from the Japanese camps. The survivors of the Bataan Death March. The Burma-Thailand Railway. The specific Pacific Island camps where mortality rates documented the intent of the Japanese administration. Came home to a different kind of difficulty than the men who had been held in Germany. The specific conditions of the Japanese camps were, in many cases, designed to kill, not through the specific mechanism of the gas chambers. The Japanese approach was different from a Nazi approach in its specific character, though not in its fundamental disregard for the lives of the people in its custody. The Japanese approach was starvation, disease, forced labor, and the specific violence of guards who were operating within a system that had explicitly valued the prisoner's life at less than nothing, that had classified capture as a form of dishonor and captured as unworthy of the consideration that the laws of war required. The specific men who survived this, who came home from the Death March and the Death Railway and the specific camps of the Pacific, were not simply men who had been deprived of food and shelter. They were men who had been subjected to the specific experience of being treated as subhuman, of being worked and starved and beaten in the systematic way of the system that had decided that their lives were worth less than nothing. The specific psychological consequence of this, the specific impact of being treated as subhuman on the person's sense of their own humanity, is one of the least discussed dimensions of the Pacific prisoner experience. There was a man from Alabama who had survived Bataan and 3 years in the Philippines. He had watched men die in ways that I will not describe in detail here. Not because the details are not important, but because they belong in a specific historical account of what happened in those camps and not in a specific human story of what the survival cost the people who achieved it. He had watched these things and survived them and had been liberated in the specific chaos of the Pacific's final months and had been brought home on a hospital ship and had spent 2 months in an army hospital before being sent back to Alabama. He came home to a state that was celebrating the victory. He came home to a family that was celebrating his survival. He came home to a community that knew he had been a prisoner, but did not know what being a prisoner had meant in the specific conditions of the Philippines, and that celebrated his return with the specific joy and the specific ignorance of community that is grateful without being informed. He did not tell them what he had seen, not because he was protecting them. Exactly, though there was an element of that, because the specific things he had seen were not speakable in the specific context of the celebration, because the specific gap between what he was being asked to celebrate, the victory, the survival, the return, and the specific things the survival had required witnessing was a gap that the celebration could not contain. He was angry, not at the celebration, not at the family that was glad he was home, not at the country that was victory dancing. He was angry in the specific, unfocused way of a person who has been treated in a way that requires anger and who has no adequate object for the anger in the specific peacetime context of the return. The Japanese government was not available to him in Alabama in 1945. The specific guards who had administered the specific conditions of the camp were not available to him. The anger was real and had no place to go. He drank. For the first 10 years after the war, he drank in the specific way of a man who is managing something that has no other management available to it. Not spectacularly. He kept his job, kept his marriage, kept the specific ordinary functioning of the ordinary life, but heavily, in a specific way that becomes visible over years in the specific pattern of the health and the relationships and the specific distance that the drinking produces between the person and the people around him. His wife managed this with a specific love and the specific practicality of a woman who had her own things to manage and who had decided that the man she had married was worth managing the drinking alongside. She was not naive about what the drinking was about. She had made specific inquiries in the specific, careful way that a practical woman makes inquiries into what had happened in the Philippines, and she had found enough to understand, in general terms, why a man might drink. She did not make him explain. She kept showing up. He stopped drinking in 1956. He stopped because his oldest son, who was 11 years old, asked him once, with the specific directness of an 11-year-old who has decided to say the thing he's been thinking for a long time, why Daddy drank so much. He did not have an answer for the 11-year-old. He did not drink again. The specific act of the son's question, the specific directness of the child cutting through the specific management of the adult situation, is one of the stories about the returned prisoner that I find most clarifying, not because the child's question was a therapeutic intervention that healed the wound. The wound was not healed, but because the specific question from the specific person at the specific moment produced a specific response, the stopping, that the other context had not produced. He was 41 years old when his son asked the question. He was 41 years old when he stopped. He lived to 83, and he did not drink again. He never talked about the Philippines in detail. What he did do, in the years after he stopped drinking, the years in which he was fully present to his family in a way that he had not been when the drinking managed the distance, was pay the specific close attention to people around him that the man in Ohio had paid to the ordinary pleasures. He paid attention to his children, to his grandchildren, to the specific ordinary details of their specific ordinary lives, with a quality of attention that the family found remarkable, and that was, in its specific character, the specific response to a man who had been in a place where nothing was ordinary and who had come home to the ordinary and was not going to take it for granted. His granddaughter described him as the most attentive person she had ever known, the most present, the most interested, the most genuinely engaged in the specific details of the specific life in front of him. She did not know, for most of her childhood, why he was this way. She learned why later, when she was old enough to be told some of the story. She understands it differently now. The camp had taught him what the ordinary was worth. He came home, and he paid attention to it for the rest of his life. This is a specific thing that the specific experience of the prisoner teaches, in the most direct possible way. The thing that the ordinary life teaches only slowly, through the specific accumulation of ordinary days that makes the ordinariness invisible. The camp shows you, in the specific form of the absence, what the presence is worth. The men who came home from the camps, from Germany and from Japan and from the specific places where Allied soldiers were held, came home to a country that did not know what they had learned. The country was celebrating. The country was building. The country was moving forward in the specific momentum of the post-war expansion. The country had not been inside the gate and did not know what being inside the gate teaches about the value of the outside. They knew. They came home knowing. And the knowing was part of what made them the specific people they were in the peacetime lives they built. The ones who managed to carry the knowing without being broken by it, who converted the specific knowledge of the camp into the specific attention to the ordinary that some of them demonstrated, brought something back from the gate that the people who had never been through it did not have. The gate opened. They walked through. They felt nothing, or they felt everything, or they felt the specific thing between those two extremes that the specific experience of each specific person produced. They went home. They built lives. They paid attention to their meals and their seasons and the faces of their children. That is what it costs to come home from behind the gate. That is what it produces in the people who manage it. That is the full accounting. The specific phenomenon of repatriation, the specific process of returning from captivity to freedom and to the life that existed before the captivity, has been studied in the decades since the Second World War in ways that illuminate both the specific challenges of the returned prisoner and the specific resilience that many of them demonstrated. The research consistently finds that the returned prisoner war faces a specific double adjustment: the adjustment of freedom itself and the adjustment to the specific world that freedom returns him to. Both adjustments are real and both impose specific costs, and the interaction between them, the way that the difficulty of adjusting to the world is complicated by the difficulty of adjusting to freedom, and vice versa, is one of the specific features of the returned prisoner's experience that distinguishes it from other forms of the wartime return. The adjustment of freedom itself is perhaps the counterintuitive element for people who have not experienced extended captivity. The intuitive assumption is that freedom is immediately welcome, that the gate opening produces instant relief and instant orientation. The research in the account of the returned prisoners themselves consistently contradicts this assumption. Extended captivity produces specific adaptations, specific ways of understanding the environment, specific habits of behavior, specific psychological orientations that are functional within the captive environment and that do not immediately translate to the free environment. The man who has organized his cognitive and emotional life around the specific structure of the camp, the roll calls, the rations, the specific social world of a specific group of prisoners, is not prepared for the specific formlessness of freedom. Freedom requires a specific kind of self-direction that the camp has systematically suppressed. The returned prisoner who has spent years having the decisions made for him, what to eat, where to sleep, when to move, how to spend the hours, is a person who has lost, to varying degrees depending on the specific conditions and the specific person, the specific capacity for self-direction that the free life requires. He had been in the camp for 3 years and 4 months. He had not chosen his meals in 3 years and 4 months. He had not chosen his schedule. He had not chosen his location, his company, his activities. He had been given these things in the specific form that the camp provided, and the specific person he had become over the 3 years had adapted to the given rather than the chosen. Coming home required choosing. The specific choice of what to eat for breakfast, the specific abundance of the American table, after 3 years of the German ration, was a small thing that was also not a small thing. He did not know what he wanted, in the specific immediate sense of what he wanted for breakfast on a specific morning, because the specific faculty of wanting had been replaced by the specific faculty of accepting what was provided, the rebuilding of the wanting, the specific reemergence of the preference and the desire and the self-directedness that the freedom of the ordinary life requires, was a specific process that took time. Some men rebuilt it quickly. The specific resilience that the research documents in a significant percentage of returned prisoners, the specific capacity to recover the self that was present before the captivity and to reintegrate it with the self that the captivity had produced, is one of the more remarkable findings of the research. The human being is extraordinarily adaptable in both directions, adaptable to the conditions of captivity, and adaptable back out of them. Some men took longer. The specific factors that predicted the speed and the completeness of the reintegration were complex and individual. The severity of the captivity, the pre-war psychological resources of the specific person, the quality of the specific support that was available in return, and the specific character of the person's response to difficulty, which is itself a complex product of the specific history and the specific temperament. The man from Ohio, the one who stood on the road feeling nothing, was somewhere in the middle of the distribution. He rebuilt himself gradually over a period of years. The specific pace of the rebuilding was not dramatic. It was a specific pace of the ordinary, the daily accumulation of ordinary days that gradually produced an ordinary life that he and his wife eventually built together. The specific thing that his wife provided that the research identifies as most important to the returned prisoner's recovery was the specific ongoing presence of someone who knew him before the camp and who continued to know him after it. Not in the sense of requiring him to be the same as he had been before. She was too practically intelligent for that. But in the sense of maintaining the specific knowledge of the specific person, the specific qualities that had always been his, that the camp had not erased, that she could reflect back to him as evidence that the person he had been was still present in the person he was becoming. This specific form of the witness, the specific ongoing knowledge and acknowledgement of the person who is recovering, is what the research identifies as the most important single relational resource for the person in recovery from captivity or trauma. Not the therapy, not the medical care, not the specific interventions of the institutional support system. Though all of these have their place, the specific ongoing relationship of the person who knows you and continues to show up is the specific thing that supports the recovery most fundamentally. He had this. His wife provided it for 40 years. He recovered, not completely, not to the exact person he had been before the camp, because the 3 years had produced changes that were permanent in the way that significant experiences produce permanent changes, but to a life, to a good life, to a life that both of them could call their own. The specific country he came home to had also changed in ways that eventually resolved into the recognizable, the specific strangeness of the first weeks and months, the specific disorientation of a man who had been away while the country moved, gradually gave way to the specific familiarity of re-engagement. He went back to the hardware store he had worked in before the war. He relearned the specific routines of the specific community. He rebuilt the specific knowledge of the place that the 3 years and 4 months had allowed to atrophy. The country he came home to was not the country he had left. The country he eventually built his life in was different from either one. It was a country that existed in 1945 and after, the country of the post-war boom, the GI Bill, the specific expansion of the American middle class that the post-war economy made possible. He participated in this expansion with the specific energy of a man who had been outside it for 3 years and who was now inside it and was going to use it. He bought a house. He had children. He built a career. He engaged in the specific civic life of the specific community in the specific ways that the specific community provided. He was, in most of the ways that the outside world could see, a successful American of the post-war generation, a man who had served, who had come home, who had built the specific life that the GI Bill was designed to enable. The camp was always there, not as a defining presence, not in the way of the man in Ohio whose count ran every night, more as a background condition, a specific quality of the experience that was always present in the way that the most significant experiences are always present, informing the texture of the life without necessarily dominating it. He did not talk about the camp much, not because he was suppressing it. He was not, as his family attests, a man who suppressed things, but because the specific experience of the camp was one that he had processed over the years into a specific place in his understanding of his own life, a place that was real and present, and that he could visit when the specific context of conversation or an experience brought him there. But that was not the place he lived in. The specific processing of the experience, the specific integration of the camp into the narrative of the life in a way that acknowledged its significance without allowing to define everything else, was a specific psychological achievement of his recovery, and it was an achievement that took years and that required the specific support of the specific people around him. He died in 1991. He was 73 years old at his funeral. His son described a man who had lived his life with a specific quality of attention to the ordinary, to meals and seasons and the specific small pleasures that the ordinary life provides, that the son had always attributed to a general quality of character. He attributed it differently after he learned the details of the camp. He understood that the specific quality of attention to the ordinary was the specific response of man who had been without the ordinary for 3 years and 4 months, and who had come to understand, through the specific experience of the absence, what the presence was worth. He paid attention to his meals because he remembered what it was like not to have them. He paid attention to the seasons because he remembered what it was like to wait for them behind a gate. He paid attention to the specific ordinary pleasures of the specific ordinary life because the specific extraordinary deprivation the camp had taught him, in the most direct possible way, what those things were worth. The gate opened on a Tuesday morning in April 1945. He walked through it. He felt nothing. He went home. He rebuilt his life. He paid attention to the ordinary for 46 more years. That is the full accounting. That is a prisoner who came home from the war and found his country changed and found himself changed and found the specific gap between the two and crossed it one ordinary day at a time for the rest of his life. The specific experience of the Second World War prisoner of war, the American soldiers captured by the Japanese or the Germans, the British and Commonwealth soldiers captured in North Africa or the Pacific, the Soviet soldiers captured by the Germans in the millions, varied so enormously across different contexts that the single category of the prisoner of war experience is almost too broad to be useful. The American prisoners held in Germany experienced conditions that were, in most cases, harsh but survivable: inadequate food, inadequate shelter, the specific deprivation of liberty that is a defining characteristic of the prisoner experience, but not the systematic murder that characterized the Japanese handling of Allied prisoners or the Soviet handling of German prisoners. The American prisoners held by Japan experienced conditions that were, in many cases, designed to kill. The Bataan Death March, the specific camps in the Pacific, where prisoners died in large numbers from starvation, disease, and deliberate brutality. The British and Commonwealth prisoners on the Burma-Thailand Railway, the Death Railway, experienced conditions whose mortality rates document the specific intent of the Japanese administration. The man whose story this has had been held in Germany. He had been captured in Tunisia in 1943 during the North Africa campaign and had spent the following 3 years in a series of German prisoner of war camps, ending with a specific camp in Bavaria where the American liberation found him in April 1945. His experience had been the specific experience of the German-held American prisoner, hard in ways that the research documents with specificity, but survivable in ways that the Japanese-held prisoner's experience often was not. He had survived. He was alive. He walked through the gate and stood on the road and felt nothing and waited for the nothing to become something. What he found when he got home was a country that had been at war for 3 years and 4 months while he was a prisoner, and that had changed in specific ways that 3 years of total war changes a country, and that was now celebrating the ending of the war in ways that a specific experience of the previous 3 years had not prepared him to participate in. He came home to Ohio in June 1945. The specific town he came home to had changed in ways that were both visible and invisible. The visible changes were the ones that the war had made to the physical landscape of a wartime American town. The factories that had been converted to war production, the absence of men in certain age ranges from the street, the specific material changes of a country that had been organized around a war effort for 4 years. These changes were visible. He could see them. The invisible changes were the ones that the town had made in the specific way that communities make changes when they've been through something large together. The shared references, the shared stories, the specific collective experience of the war years that the people who had been in the town had in common with each other and that he had not had with them. He had been somewhere else while they were having the experience. He had been inside the gate. He had not been at the factory or at the bond drives or at the VFW hall when the news came. He had not been part of the specific collective experience of the American home front. He was a veteran. He was also, in a specific way that he could not fully name, an outsider to the specific community that had formed around the shared experience of the war years. He had fought in the war, and he had been imprisoned in the war, and he had survived the war, and he had not had the specific experience that the people home had had, and the gap between his experience and their experience was not a gap that the shared category of the war could close. The specific disorientation that this produced, the specific experience of recognizing the place and not recognizing yourself in place, is one of the least discussed dimensions of the prisoner of war's return, and it is one of the most pervasive. The prisoner came home to a community that had been through something he had not been through, having been through something that the community had not been through. The specific asymmetry of experience was a specific form of the distance between the returned prisoner and the people who had stayed. His wife had been working at the factory. She had developed in his absence the specific capabilities and the specific confidence of a woman who has been managing everything alone for 3 years and 4 months. She had built a life in his absence, not a life without him, but a life that functioned, that had its own rhythms and its own networks and its own specific efficiency that had developed in the specific conditions of the solo management. The specific life she had built was a good life. It was also a life that did not automatically have a place for him in the form he had left in. He was thinner than he had been. He moved differently, with the specific economy of movement that 3 years of scarcity had developed, the specific care of a man who had learned to conserve energy in the conditions of the camp. He ate differently. He could not sit with the specific abundance of the first American meals he was given without a specific physical discomfort that was partly physiological and partly the specific psychological difficulty of trusting that the abundance was real and would continue. He slept differently, with the specific alertness of a man whose sleep had been a vigilant thing for 3 years, whose rest had always contained the specific awareness of the environment around and that the camp conditions required. He was not the same man who had shipped out to North Africa in 1942. He was not the same man she had married in 1940. He was a man who had been in the camp for 3 years and 4 months, and the camp had changed him in specific ways that 3 years of marriage had not prepared her to absorb, and that his 3 years in the camp had not prepared him to explain. They tried. They had been a good couple before the war, genuinely suited each other, genuinely in love in the specific way of two people who had found the right person and knew it. The specific foundation of the marriage was real and strong, and it would eventually support the specific weight of the readjustment. But the specific readjustment was hard, in ways that neither of them had fully anticipated. The specific thing he could not explain was a camp, not because he refused to discuss it. He was not, by disposition, a man who kept things inside. He had always been a talker, a sharer, a man who processed his experiences through the specific act of putting them into words with the person he trusted most. But the camp had produced specific experiences that the available language could not contain. Not the dramatic extremes, the cold, the hunger, the specific incidents of brutality. These could be described inadequately in the language that the war narratives made available. The specific interior experience of 3 years of captivity, the specific quality of the time, the specific psychological adaptation to the conditions, the specific person he had become in the specific crucible of the camp. These could not be described because he did not have a language and because he was not sure the person he was describing them to could receive what he was trying to say. She felt the gap between what he could say and what he needed to say, and she felt the specific frustration of a person who loves someone and cannot help them in the specific way that the situation requires. And she felt the specific love that continues despite the frustration, which is a specific form of love that marriages require when they are being tested. They navigated it, not perfectly. The specific navigation of the returning prisoner's reintegration was never a perfectly smooth process for any of the couples who attempted it, but well enough, in the specific way that people who are committed to each other and who are also in possession of the specific ordinary tools of the human repair kit manage most of the specific crises that life imposes. The ordinary tools were the daily presence, the specific meals shared, the specific routines rebuilt, the specific trust reestablished in the specific accumulation of ordinary days that make a life and that make the life recognizable to people who are living it. They rebuilt the ordinary held. There were other prisoners who came home to more difficult situations. The specific case of the American prisoners held by Japan, the men who survived the Bataan Death March, the specific camps of the Pacific, the Burma-Thailand Railway, were coming home from conditions that had been dramatically more severe than the conditions of the German-held camps, and their specific reintegration was correspondingly more difficult. The physical damage was visible and documented. The malnutrition, the untreated injuries and diseases, the specific medical consequences of years of deliberate deprivation. The psychological damage was less visible and less documented, in the specific way that the period's medicine and psychology were not equipped to see it clearly. The men who survived the Japanese camps came home with specific symptoms that the period's medicine called tropical diseases, and that the subsequent research has identified as combat trauma and complex post-traumatic stress. They came home to a country that was celebrating the victory over Japan without fully understanding what the victory had looked like from inside the Japanese prison camps. They came home to families and communities that were glad they had survived and that did not know what survival in those specific conditions had required or what it had cost. The specific anger that many of these men carried toward the Japanese, toward the war, toward the specific circumstances that had produced the experience, was a real and in some ways appropriate response to what had been done to them. The specific difficulty was what to do with the anger in a peacetime context that had no appropriate outlet for it. The anger that was appropriate to the specific experience of the Japanese camps was not appropriate to the specific context of a peacetime American town, and the specific management of the anger, finding the specific forms that the peacetime context could accommodate, was one of the specific ongoing challenges of the returned prisoner's life. Some of them managed it well. They found the specific outlets, the work, the family, the community engagement, the specific physical activity that the anger could be discharged through, that allowed them to build the specific peacetime lives that the wartime experience had made difficult. Some of them did not manage it well, and the specific consequences of the anger that was not managed, the drinking, the violence, the specific relationship failures, were the specific costs paid by the men themselves and by the people around them. The country they came home to had not been what they imagined during the captivity, not worse. In most specific ways, the country they came home to was better than the country they had left, richer and more confident and more capable and more optimistic, but different from the imagining, in the specific way that the imagined thing is always different from the real thing. The country in the imagination had been a static place. The country, as it was when they left, preserved in the specific amber of the memory of the departure. The country they came home to had been moving while they were gone, and the movement had produced a country that was recognizably the same country, and also somehow different from the country they had been imagining. This is a specific disorientation of the returned prisoner, not the disorientation of the homecoming soldier who has been through the same thing as other soldiers, and who comes home to a community that has been through the same thing as other home front communities. The shared experience creates a specific bridge that makes the reintegration possible. The prisoner comes home from a specific and isolated experience that no one around him has shared, to a community that has had a specific and collective experience that he has not shared. The two specific experiences have left both the prisoner and the community in different places from where they started, and the specific task of finding each other again is more difficult than it would have been if either of them had stood still. He stood on the road outside the gate and felt nothing and waited for the nothing to become something. It became something. It became the specific life that the 3 years and 4 months and the road home and the specific navigation to return all eventually produced. It was a real life. It was a good life. It was a life that the camp was always somewhere in the background of, that the specific experience was always present in the way that the significant experiences of life are always present even when they are not visible. He came home. He found the country he had imagined and the country that had moved while he was gone. He found the wife he had married and the woman she had become while he was inside the gate. He found the specific gap between the person he had been and the person he was. And he built the specific life that was possible for the person he was in the country that existed when he came back. That is what it means to come home from a prison camp. Not the liberation at the gate, the newsreel moment, the freedom, the specific relief of the open road, the long specific work that comes after, the specific country that has been moving while you were inside, the specific wife who has been building a life in your absence, the specific person you are that is different from the specific person you were. The gate opened on a Tuesday morning in April 1945. He walked through it. He stood on the road. He felt nothing. Then he went home. That is where the Real story begins. The specific broader context of what the prisoner of war experience meant for the post-war generation, the specific ways in which the returned prisoners shaped the specific communities they came back to, is worth examining because it illuminates something important about the specific gift that difficulty sometimes gives. The men who came home from the camps, who had been inside the gate, and who knew what being outside was worth, were not simply damaged men carrying specific wounds. There were also men who had been given a specific knowledge that most people do not receive, the specific knowledge of deprivation that makes appreciation possible in the specific way that ordinary plenty does not. The research on post-traumatic growth, the specific phenomenon of meaningful positive change that can emerge in the struggle to survive and integrate traumatic experience, documents the specific gift in the accounts of returned prisoners with particular frequency. The men who managed integration effectively, who found a way to carry the camp without being destroyed by it, often describe specific positive changes in their relationship to their lives and the people in them, the specific increased appreciation for the ordinary, the specific deepened relationship to the people they loved, the specific clarity about what mattered and what did not, that the specific experience of having everything that mattered taken away had produced. This is not an argument that the camp was good for them. It was not good for them. It damaged them in specific ways that were real and lasting. The specific post-traumatic growth that some of them experienced was not a compensation for the damage. It did not make the damage acceptable. It was a specific additional thing that the specific struggle to recover from the damage sometimes produced. The distinction matters because the narrative of the trauma survivor's growth is sometimes used to minimize the trauma, to suggest that because survivors sometimes become stronger or wiser or more appreciative as a result of their experiences, the experiences themselves were somehow beneficial. They were not. The camp was not good for anyone. The growth that some people achieved through the specific struggle to survive the camp and come home from it was a triumph of the human capacity for recovery, not an argument for the camp. But the growth was real, and the specific people who achieved it deserved to be acknowledged for the specific act of will and resilience that it required. They did not simply recover from the camp. They took the specific knowledge that the camp had given them, the specific knowledge of what they had been without for 3 years and 4 months, and they used it to build specific lives that were informed by that knowledge in specific ways that the people who had not been to the gate could not easily replicate. The man from Ohio paid attention to his meals for 46 years. The man from Alabama paid attention to his grandchildren for 42 years. Both of them had been taught in the specific school of the camp what deserved attention and what did not. The country they came back to was celebrating. The country was building. The country was moving. The country did not know what they knew. The country, in the specific optimism of the post-war boom, was paying attention to what was being gained. The men who came home from the camps were paying attention to what had been almost lost, to the specific ordinary things that the specific ordinary life provides and that the specific extraordinary deprivation the camp had made visible by taking them away. The specific quality of attention, the specific appreciation of the ordinary that the experience of the extraordinary deprivation produces, is one of the gifts that the returned prisoners brought home with them alongside the specific damage. It is not the most visible gift. The damage was more visible, but it was real, and the specific people who received it from the men who came home, the wives and children and grandchildren who grew up in the presence of this specific quality of attention, were affected by it in specific ways that the research is only beginning to document. The camp opened at the gate. The men walked through. They went home. They paid attention. That is the gift and the wound together. That is a returned prisoner. That is a full accounting of what the camp cost and what the camp, in its specific paradoxical way, also gave. There is one more story I want to tell before this episode ends. It is the story of a man who came home from a Japanese camp in 1945 and who did something specific with a specific experience that I have not encountered in any other account of a returned prisoner. He became a teacher, not a teacher of history. He taught mathematics in a high school in Oregon for 32 years. He became a teacher of mathematics because he had decided, in the specific clarity that the camp had given him about what mattered, that the specific ability to think clearly and to solve specific problems was one of the most valuable things a person could have, and that teaching it to young people was one of the most important things he could do with the specific remaining years of his life. His students remembered him as the most exacting teacher they had ever had, and also the most patient. He had standards that were real and that he enforced consistently, and he had a patience with the process of learning that his students found unusual, the specific patience of a man who knew that some things take time and that the time is worth giving. He taught mathematics to students for 32 years. At his retirement dinner, several of his former students came back to tell him what he had meant to them. One of them, a woman who had gone on to become an engineer, said something that has stayed with me since I heard it. She said, "You taught us that the problem has an answer, that there is something you can find if you look carefully enough and work persistently enough. You made us believe that the thing we were looking for was there." He received this. He thanked her. He did not tell her what he was thinking when she said it, because what he was thinking was about the camp, about the specific experience of looking for the answer in a situation that seemed to have no answer, of working persistently in conditions that seemed designed to make persistence impossible, of believing through the specific discipline of the will that there was something on the other side of the gate if he could just survive until the gate opened. He had taught his students what the camp had taught him. He had translated the specific knowledge of the specific experience into the specific form that was available to him. The mathematics classroom, the problem with an answer, the specific patient insistence that the thing could be found if you looked carefully and worked persistently. This is a specific form of the gift I was describing, not the grand narrative of the transformed life. The specific translation of the specific knowledge into the specific form that the specific context allowed. He knew something about persistence and about the existence of the answer. He taught it to young people in Oregon for 32 years. The young people who received it carried it into their adult lives. The camp taught him. He taught them. The knowledge reached forward through the specific generations of students in the specific form that the mathematics classroom allowed. He died in 1997. One of his former students gave the eulogy. She talked about the problem and the answer. She talked about the patients. She talked about what it meant to learn from the specific person who had learned it in the specific place he had learned it, that the thing you are looking for is there. The gate opened on a Tuesday morning in April 1945. The man who came through it had been inside for 3 years. He went home. He felt nothing. Then he felt something. He built a life. He taught mathematics. He taught 32 years of students that the problem has an answer. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. The men who came home from the camps deserve to be known for what they carried and what they built with it. That is the full accounting. That is a prisoner who came home from the war and found his country change, and who changed himself over the specific years of the specific life into the specific person who taught high school mathematics in Oregon for 32 years and who knew from the inside that the problem has an answer and that the answer can be found if you look carefully enough and work persistently enough. The gate opened. He walked through. He went home. He built a life. He paid attention. That is enough. That is everything. The specific question that the prisoner's story poses, the question that I want to leave you with, is one that I think is worth carrying beyond this specific episode. What do you do with the knowledge of what the ordinary is worth? Not in the abstract, not in the specific formulation of gratitude and mindfulness that the self-help literature provides, in the specific personal sense. When you understand from the specific account of the specific man who stood outside the gate and felt nothing and then went home and paid attention for 46 years, when you understand from the specific account of the specific man who taught his students that the problem has an answer, what the ordinary is worth, what do you do with that understanding? The answer that the returned prisoners found in their specific different ways was, you use it. You translate it into the specific form that the specific context of your specific life allows. The man who paid attention to his meals used it in the form of attention to meals. The man who coached Little League and tended the graves used it in the form of the civic engagement. The mathematics teacher used it in the form of 32 years of teaching that the problem has an answer. The specific translation is a specific act of the specific person. No one can tell you the specific form that the translation should take in your specific life. But the knowledge itself, the knowledge of what the ordinary is worth, received from the specific people who learned it in the specific way they learned it, is available to you if you receive it. The men who came home from the camps had this knowledge. Many of them shared it in the specific forms available to them. The attention, the presence, the specific insistence on the value of the ordinary that the family around them experienced as a specific quality of the specific person. Some of it has been transmitted to the generation after, to the children and grandchildren who grew up in the presence of the specific attention and who absorbed, through the specific proximity, some fraction of the specific knowledge. Some of it has been lost with the generation that held it. The knowledge that dies with the person who learned it when the person goes and has not been transmitted. The oral history, the specific accounts, the specific stories that the families and the archives have preserved. These are the specific attempts to transmit the knowledge in a specific form that outlasts the person. The story is the form. The story carries the knowledge that the person's presence once carried. The gate opened on a Tuesday morning in April 1945. The man walked through it. He went home. He rebuilt his life. He paid attention for 46 years to the specific ordinary things that the camp had taught him were worth paying attention to. He is gone now. His son is in his 70s. His grandchildren are adults. The specific quality of attention that the camp produced in him, that specific gift alongside the specific wound, reached forward to the family in the specific ways that the family's transmission allows. The gate is still there. The road leads away from it. The man who walked through it is gone. The knowledge he carried is in the story. The story is being told. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. The prisoners who came home from the war deserve to be known. Not for what they survived, though that is remarkable, but for what they did with the survival and what they carried forward into the specific ordinary lives that the survival made possible. That is the full accounting. That is the prisoner who came home from the war. The gate opened. He walked through. He went home. He paid attention. That is enough. That is everything. The specific research on prisoner of war reintegration, conducted primarily in the 1970s and 1980s, when the Second World War veterans were in their 50s and 60s and could be studied systematically, produced findings that confirm the specific accounts in this episode and that illuminate the broader pattern of the returned prisoners' experience. The studies found that returned prisoners, as a group, showed specific patterns of long-term adjustment that were distinguishable from those of combat veterans who had not been captured. They showed higher rates of specific physical health problems, the specific legacy of the malnutrition and the disease and the untreated injuries, and higher rates of specific psychological symptoms. They also showed, among those who achieved good long-term adjustment, specific patterns of what the researchers called heightened meaning-making, the specific tendency to find deeper significance in ordinary experience that the account of the Ohio man and the Alabama man and the Oregon mathematics teacher all exemplify. The heightened meaning-making was not universal. Not all returned prisoners achieved it. The ones who did not achieve it, who remained in the specific trapped quality of the unprocessed experience, paid the specific ongoing cost of the unintegrated trauma in the specific forms of the health consequences and the relationship difficulties, and the specific distance from the ordinary that the unintegrated experience produces. The ones who achieved it, who found the specific way to integrate the experience and to translate the specific knowledge that had given them into the specific forms available in their specific lives, were by multiple measures doing better than the average for their cohort, and were in many cases doing better than the average for people who had not been through captivity at all. The specific growth that the integration of the specific experience produced was real and measurable. This is a specific paradox of the returned prisoner's experience. The specific way that the most difficult human experience can sometimes produce in the people who manage the integration, something that the easier experiences do not. Not always, not in everyone, but often enough that the research has documented it, and that the specific account of the specific families confirm it. The gate opened. The man walked through. He went home to a country that had been moving while he was inside. He found the specific gap between the country he remembered and the country that existed, and he found the specific gap between the person he had been and the person he was, and he crossed both gaps one ordinary day at a time for the rest of his life. He paid attention to his meals. He paid attention to the seasons. He paid attention to the faces of the people he loved. He taught his students that the problem has an answer. These are the specific forms that the specific knowledge took in the specific lives of the specific men who came home from the specific camps. They are also, in their specific character, the specific forms that the specific gift, the specific knowledge of what the ordinary is worth, can take in any life that is willing to receive it. The gate opened on a Tuesday morning in April 1945. The man walked through it. He went home. He paid attention for 46 years. The story is still being told. The knowledge is still being transmitted. The gate is still there in the family memory, and the road that leads away from it, and the specific man who stood on the road and felt nothing and waited for the nothing to become something. It became something. It became the specific life. It became the specific attention. It became the specific teaching. That is the full accounting. That is a prisoner who came home from the war and found his country changed and paid attention to the rest of it for the rest of his life.